jQuery effects library. We'll be looking at how to use the effects library that's built into jQuery, but there's some important things to understand about animation in JavaScript versus animation in CSS. Generally, it's better to do animation in CSS, if at all possible. When the animation is done in CSS, the computer's GPU can be used to help with the processing of the animation. That will make the animation smoother and more efficient. You'll particularly notice this on phones, especially older phones. However, the effects library in jQuery is really easy to use, and for something minor, or if you need something really quick, it can be a great option. So in this particular lesson, we'll be looking at how to use the effects library in jQuery. I have some example files that you can download, and when you open them up, they look kind of nice. Here's example 1, and we'll look at how to apply some effects using these buttons here. So if we go over and look at the HTML involved here, I just have some links with these buttons, and then I've got this box here, and I've got a little bit of CSS up here to kind of make it look nice, and that's fine. And down here, you'll notice that I have jQuery plugged in, so that's all set and ready to go, and a place for us to put our script. Now, the first one that we're going to look at is the hide function, which we've already looked at before. So we've seen this hide function when we did the sidebar menu exercise. When we did that script, you've seen this hide function before. But the hide function can also do animation. So let's take a look at how to do that. So over here, what I could do is I could type in here, I could go get this first link here. So I'm going to use my jQuery object. Always type it like that, and then I'm going to come in here, I'm going to get hide box, that link. And I'm going to add a click handler to it. Click. Oops. And when I click it, I'm going to run a function. Like so. And in that function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this element, again, using my jQuery object, this element box, div id pound box. And I'm going to tell it to hide. Now, if we do it like this, it will work, but it won't do any animation. Let's try it out. If I come over here and refresh this page and click hide, you can see the box goes away. But in jQuery, you can actually pass a value in here. And there are a few keywords that it can use. You can use normal, slow, or fast. And you'll see now when I do refresh and click hide, it does an animation as it hides that box. You could do slow or fast. Or you could put in a number, and the number is the number of milliseconds. So if I put 500, that will be half a second is how long that animation will take place. Great. Or if you really want to see something to demonstrate how much that affects it, you could do like 2 seconds. That's a long time for an animation like this. See what that does. There we go. So you can see that you can affect the speed there. In the last video, we saw that we could add a function here that will hide the box and animate that. Let's add a couple more. We've got a few more buttons here. So let's do a few more of these. And you could copy this and paste it, or you could type it again. I think it's always a good idea when you're practicing this stuff to type it again, just so you're getting used to using the jQuery syntax. So now I'm going to do pound show box, or hashtag if you prefer hash instead. And I'm going to add the click handler there, like so, and then put a function in here. Always type from the outside in, so you really get used to the syntax and understand which thing closes which thing. So I'm going to do function, parentheses, curly braces there, and move that down. And then I'm going to do, again, I'm going to go get my jQuery object and get pound show box. No box, just box, so the same box. And instead of hide, I'm going to do show. And maybe we'll make this one go for 500 milliseconds. And you'll see that will work. Let's test that. If I come over here and refresh this, I can hide the box and I can show the box. And you can see the difference in time. So that's working great. Now, toggle will both hide and show. If it's hidden, it'll show it. If it's showing, it'll hide it. So let's do that one. And so over here, again, I'm just going to, now this time, just for expedience sake, I'm going to copy it. But I really recommend that you type it so you get kind of used to that. So this is toggle box. It's this link here. It's this link up here, toggle box. And then down here, we're going to do box. And instead of show, we're going to do toggle, like that. And you'll see over here, if I run this, it will hide it and it will show it. So this one does both. Remember, toggle is a helper function that allows us to do both hiding and showing. And we've seen that before. But now we can use it with the effects library and do some animation with it. Now, one of the really great things about these animations and doing this in JavaScript and in jQuery is that you have a thing called a callback function. So what you can do after the 500 here is you can pass in a function that runs with its parentheses and curly braces, like so. And in here we could put alert done, something like that. So this function will run after this animation has been completed. And in fact, I'm going to make this a little bit longer so that you can really see that it waits and runs after the animation has been completed. And this is super useful because sometimes you want to have a sequence of animations, and when that animation is done, you want to do something else, or something like that. So let's see how this works. And the page does the alert. So that's really cool. And I could do the other way around as well. Excellent. So with that, we are able to see that we can make these functions, these animations, and the animations can have a callback function that runs when the animation is complete. And this is super useful. Let's take a look at the next example in the next video. Let's take a look at example 2. Open up the example 2 HTML file, and you'll notice that it looks very similar to the first example. We have the same styling up at the top of the page. We have a box here. We have some navigation, and then we have this div ID set to box down here. And it's just an empty div. And you can see that it looks very similar here. But jQuery has some helper functions in for sliding up and sliding down and slide toggle. Because again, these are common tasks. These are common things that we need to do in interfaces. So they created a method that does specifically this. And that's kind of interesting and fun. So let's take a look at what we need in order to do this in our code. And the syntax is very similar to what we saw before. So what we're going to do is, like we did before, we're going to use our jQuery object to go in and get our link here. So it's pound, I've got slide up box as a link here. So let's do that, slide up box. And we'll put a click handler on that. So we're looking for .click. Oops, like so. And then in here, we're going to run a function with its own parentheses and curly braces. And then we're going to put our code inside the curly braces there, just the same way we did before. And again, as before, we're going to go get our jQuery object and get box, because that's what we're going to be moving up and down. And then what we're going to use here for our jQuery function is slide up. And again, we can put in an amount of time, or you could put inside quotes, you could put slow or something like that. And that will make that box slide up. So let's go over and give that a try. Hopefully I did that right. I think I did. So if I refresh this page and click slide up, it does that animation. And it's interesting to inspect this and watch what happens here. Actually, on the actual box itself. Watch what happens down here when I click slide up. You can see it very quickly went through some settings in here as it did that and ended up with display none. So that's kind of interesting as well. Okay, great. So we can do that, and we can do the other ones look very similar, as you can imagine. So we've got slide up box, we've got slide down box, and we've got slide toggle. And they all work very similarly. So I can actually copy that, paste it, and I recommend you type it actually, but you know, for expedience sake, I'm going to just copy and paste it and change this to slide down box. And this is going to be slide down. And I could choose an amount of time. We're going to do like 2 seconds, something like that. So we have kind of a longer time. Now, when you're working with animation, one thing to be aware of is that there's such a thing as easing. An animation can run, and it will run for the period of time. So this animation will run over 2 seconds, but it can run the exact same amount over those 2 seconds, which is linear easing, meaning that it's the same speed at the beginning as it is at the end. Or you could change the easing such that it speeds up, it goes faster at the beginning and slower at the end, or slower at the beginning and then speeds up towards the end of the animation. Or you can actually do easing in and out, where it starts slow, speeds up, and then ends slow, or starts fast, slows down, and ends fast. You can do all of these different types of easings. jQuery has some basic easing built in, and you can put in here, in quotes, swing. And that will do a little bit of easing on this item. And it's pretty subtle, so you might not really see it, but it will actually work. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So slide up, slides up. I'm going to hide this. Slide down does slide down, but it does a swing animation. So it's not the same speed all the way through. And you can kind of see the difference. It's hard to tell, but it is there. It's very subtle. Now, jQuery has built into it just some basic easing, but there's a plugin, and one of the strengths of jQuery is the plugin architecture. And we're going to talk about that in the next video. In the last video, we added some easing to our function so that now it slides up sort of just using the linear easing, but slide down is using the swing easing. And easing can give your animations a little bit of personality. They can make them seem a little bit less mechanical when the speed of the animation is not always the same all the way through the animation. But the the easings that are built into jQuery don't really give you a lot of options. They're very basic. So there's an easing plugin over here that we can use, and it allows you to choose different types of easings so that you can actually do some different types of things with this. And you can go through and try some of these different settings here to see what they actually do. So ease out will affect the animation at the end, where ease in will affect the animation at the beginning. Ease out and in will affect the animation at both ends. So we've got ease in and out, ease in, out, ease, we've got a whole bunch of them in here for all of these different. We can ease out, we can ease in, ease out, ease in, all of these different animations in here. But in order to use this, we have to plug in this plugin. And jQuery has a plugin architecture that allows you to add more functionality to jQuery. And you can see over here on our file that I've already added the plugin. So the way this works is first we need the jQuery library, then you need the plugin, and then we use it in our script. So down here, I'm going to do the third animation here for slide toggle, which we're going to use this ID. So we'll grab that ID. And down here, instead of slide down, we're going to do slide toggle, which will open it and close it. And here we can use some of the other easings that we find on this website here. This is where I got the easing plugin on the CDN that I put into here. So that's where that came from, Cloudflare. So that comes from this website here, but we can use the easings that we see here. So if I want an ease out bounce, I can actually use that animation if I want over here. So let's give that a try. Ease out bounce. And did I make sure you spell it right? With the capital letters and everything. Ease out bounce. So make sure you spell it all correct and that you get the correct capital letters. Make sure you put it inside the quotes and so on and so forth. So if I save that and then come back and look at my example here and click slide toggle, you can see that it does this bounce, which is pretty interesting. Or you could do ease in bounce to get the bounce on the opposite end of the animation, which might look a little weird, but let's give it a try. So it's doing the bounce first, and then it's finishing the animation, which looks a little weird, but you get the idea. And you could try some of these other easings and see what sort of personality you can get. So I really like the ease out circ ones. Where'd they go? Yeah, ease in and ease out circ. You can give those a try. So let's see what we can do with that over here. Ease in circ. And again, at 2 seconds, that's pretty slow. You could even slow it down more if you wanted to really sort of see it. Let's set that to 3 seconds. You can see how it changes the animation by either slowing it down or speeding it up. I think this one's speeding it up as it gets to the end of the animation. Let's come back and try ease out circ. So that's starting fast and ending slow. And it gives the animation a little bit of personality as it does its thing. That's pretty cool. And you could try ease in out circ. And it's hard to see, but it is doing something there. So try these different animations. You'll notice if you spell them wrong, if I do ease out circ like that, then it won't work quite right at all. If you inspect, you'll see that I'm getting a whole bunch of errors there because I've spelled that wrong. So that's not helpful. Also, if you were to forget this easing library, you'll notice it won't work. If I just comment this out for a minute and try ease out circ, even if I spell that right, oops, you'll notice it won't work right or work at all, really. And if I do inspect, you'll see that I have a bunch of errors cooking here because it doesn't know what to do about that because it's not a function. So in order for this easing to work, you have to really make sure that you have the easing plugin plugged in, and that, oops. There we go. And that you're spelling these correctly. Ease out, sorry. Let's give that a try again. And you can see that it's working nicely. Okay, great. So that will all work, and that's awesome. One last quick thing here before we're done with this video is you can also add the callback function after the easing. So I could add a function here and say done, and you'll see that when that easing is finished, when that animation is finished, that callback function will fire. Oops, I think I just did done, but I need to do that right. Alert. Done, like that. Now that'll work. And it comes back and it says it's done. So that's working great. Okay, so that gives us a lot of information about how to work with these built-in animations, and we're going to do more in the next video. In example 3, we'll look at something that's similar to the other two, but just slightly different. It's got 4 buttons. And we can use some built-in functions in jQuery to fade objects in and out, or to fade them to a particular percentage of opacity. So here I have fade out, which will fade it out completely. Fade in will fade it all the way to being visible. But then I have fade to 20%, which will fade it to 20% opacity, and then fade to 100%, which will fade it all the way in. So let's take a look at how we can do that. Over here I have example 3 open, and you can see that I have much the same styling up at the top of the page, as well as my navigation here and my jQuery libraries plugged in. I don't have the easing plugin here, but you could add it if you wanted to add some easing to these as well. So here we're going to just go ahead and do what we did before with getting our link pound fade out box, which is this first link up here, and we're going to add our click handler to it. Click, and then we're going to pass in our anonymous function that runs when you click that thing. And in here we're going to go get our box. So again, we use our jQuery object to get box, pound box. Sometimes students make mistakes here and they forget to type the pound. So if you do that, make sure, if it's not working, make sure you have pound box in here, because that's a common mistake that I've seen. So it's pound box to go get this div ID box here. And then we're going to I believe the function is fade out, because we're fading out the first one. Yeah, fade out. And again, we could put in normal, or you could put fast, or you could put slow, or you could put a specific number of milliseconds. 3,000. 3 seconds is kind of a long time, but we can actually give that a try. So you'll see that will actually work over here. We can fade the box out. Fade out. And over 3 seconds, it will become invisible. So that works, and that's great. And we could do fade in as well. So I can copy that and paste it, or just type it again. It's always a good idea to do that, but we're going to use this ID instead. And instead of fade out, we're going to fade in. And I could do 3 seconds, and you could do the easing, swing. It's going to go in quotes, swing. And then you could also add a callback function with its parentheses, and inside the parentheses we can add, inside the curly braces we can add an alert that says done. And so now we can fade the box out and we can fade the box in. Let's give that a try. Fade out, and it fades out over 3 seconds. Fade in, it'll fade in over 3 seconds. And when the animation is complete, it runs the alert and says that it's done. So that's great. We can do all of that. Okay, cool. So now we just need to add these last two here, and we can look at that in the next video. In this video, we'll make these last two buttons work. And with that, there's a fade to method that we can use in jQuery. So let's go see how that works. So here, just as we've done before, we can add a new event handler for when you click the button that has fade to 20 box on here. So I'm going to paste that in just to make sure I spell it right. And we'll add a click handler. And again, I recommend typing this just to get used to the syntax. And then in here, we'll add a function that runs when you click it. It's just an anonymous function. And what we're going to do here is, once again, we'll go get pound box. Don't forget the pound sign. And we're going to use the fade to method. See, it even comes up here. Fade to. And we're going to fade to, the way this works is we're going to put in the amount of time. So we'll do, again, I'll do 3,000. It's kind of slow, but gives us a sense of what that is. But then the second number it takes is a duration, an amount. No, it takes the duration. That's the first number. The second number is how much it's going to fade to. And we want to do 0.2, like that. And now that should actually work. So let's go over and check it out. If I refresh this and click fade to, it fades down, but it doesn't fade all the way down. It fades to 20%. So that's really pretty cool. So we can do that, and then we can do the fade to again for the last one. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it. And we're going to use this link, fade to 100. So when you click the fade to 100, it's going to fade to 1. So the opacity is a number between 0 and 1. 0 is completely transparent. 1 is completely opaque. And that should work just fine. So let's give it a try over here. If I refresh, I can fade down to 20, and then I can fade up to 100%. Or I could fade out entirely, and I can fade in entirely. So all of these buttons are working. This one has the callback function and the swing animation on it. And if you wanted to do some of the other easings, you would have to go get that easing plugin and stick it here after jQuery loads, but before we run our script. The order in which things loads matters because of the way that the functions build on each other. So we need to have jQuery in order to use jQuery. We would need to have the easing plugin in order to use the easing plugin. The easing plugin has to come after jQuery. So all of this stuff has to go in order on your page for it to work properly. We can have the callback functions and all that kind of fun stuff. And then in the next example, in example 4, we'll look at some custom animations where you can do some different kinds of things. In examples 1, 2, and 3, we've used some of the built-in convenience functions that jQuery has built into it for fading in and out, for sliding up and down, for hiding and showing, and toggling, slide toggle, and doing all these kinds of things that we commonly need to do. But sometimes you need to do a custom function, and we'll take a look at that in the next part of this lesson. Next, for example 4, we're going to look at some of the custom animations you can use in jQuery. And so over here, I have my example 4 file open, and you'll notice that the HTML and the CSS have changed just a little bit. I've got more links here, and my box now has some content inside the div box here, and you'll see that my styling's a little bit different up here. If you look at the actual page, it looks like this now. And we're going to make each of these buttons work so we can see how some custom animations work in jQuery. So to do this, we'll use the animate method in jQuery, and you'll see that it allows us to animate some, not all, but some of the CSS properties that we have come to know and love over the years working with CSS. And that gives us a lot of power because we can actually use these CSS properties to animate all different kinds of things, not just sliding up and down or showing and hiding and doing this kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. So let's give it a try and see what it does over here. So down here, I'm going to add in my script. I'm going to go get my jQuery object, and I'm going to get this first link up here, grow box, pound grow box, and I'm going to add a click event handler on there. And then I'm going to pass in a function that runs when you click it. And everything's going to go inside these curly braces here. And at this point, I want to affect box, pound box, don't forget the pound sign. And we're going to do the animate function in jQuery. So this will animate the box, okay? And the way we're going to do this here is we're going to pass in an object. And we have not yet worked with objects in JavaScript. They're coming. We're going to get to them later in our instruction about JavaScript. But we'll see them pop up a few times, and this is one of those times. So I'll explain it just a little bit now, but we'll get into objects in more detail a bit later. And an object is just an alternative way of storing data in JavaScript, and it comes with a key value pair. So we define an object with the curly braces, and then we have a key value pair. So in this case, the key is width. That's the CSS property we're animating. And then the value is 710px. And you'll notice that the value goes inside quotes, but the key does not. Okay, so that's kind of a distinguishing aspect of objects in JavaScript in general and also in jQuery. So let's go ahead and give this a try. We're going to animate in here. We're going to pass in an object, open and closing curly brace, and we're going to put in width, colon, and then in quotes, 710px. And that will move the box. It'll change the width of the box to 710 pixels. So let's give that a try. If I come over here and test this, refresh, grow box, and you can see it sets it so that it's 710 pixels. And I knew it was 710 pixels to end right here so it all lines up and looks nice. So that's kind of cool. All right, so we were able to pass that in and do that one. Let's take a look at growing the text and affecting the actual text inside the box in the next video. For this next example, we will start with our jQuery object again, as always, and then go and get the element that we want to get, which in this case is #grow box, because we're getting, oh no, we're growing the text. We want grow text. It's always good to copy and paste just to make sure you're getting exactly the right thing. And then we'll do click, parentheses, and a semicolon. That click handler will run when we click on grow text. And then we're going to come in here, we'll add our function that runs when we click on that. Oops, I put square braces, I want curly braces. Move that down, and then once again, I'm going to go get my box, #box, inside quotes there. And I'm going to run the animate, the custom animate function here. And again, we're going to pass in with curly braces, not square brackets, curly braces, an object. And what are we going to do here? We're going to do font in quotes. No, this one looks like this. Let me come over here. Font size. We're using the JavaScript version of font size rather than the CSS version, which is font-size. So we can't have the dash in there because JavaScript will think that looks like a minus sign. And so it's trying to subtract size from font, and that's not going to work. So instead, what we want is font size, colon, and then I can set it to, say, 24px or something like that. And that should change the font size. So let's give it a try. Over here, I can grow the box and I can grow the text. Whoops, did I do something wrong? Maybe I did. Let's see, inspect, console. Maybe I just forgot to refresh. Grow the box, grow the text. There we go. So that's working just fine. And you could try a different size text if you wanted to. You could do 36 pixels or 40 or whatever you want to do. That would be a little bit more dramatic. Grow the box, grow the text, and that's working great. Okay, cool. And we could also move the box. Let's give that one a try. So with move box, what we're going to do is we're actually going to change the position of the box. And in order to do that, we need to set some positioning for box. So in our CSS over here, for box, we need to add position, absolute. And then we want to set the left position, left 50px. And why is it 50 pixels? Because everything else is indented 50 pixels in here. I think I have that. Yeah, see, so I have padding 50 pixels. So if I don't set left 50 pixels, let's take a look at this really quickly. So if I reset that, that puts that in the right place. But if I didn't put the 50 pixels in there, left 50 pixels, well, maybe it won't actually do anything. I think that will actually maybe be fine. But still, I want to set the left to 50 pixels so that I'm moving from this position. Oops. Left 50 pixels. Because we're going to change the left property when we move the box. So down here, again, I'm just going to copy this for the sake of making it a little bit quicker. And down here, instead of grow text, I'm going to move box. Move box, animate, and then here I'm going to change the left property, left, And I'm going to do plus equals 300 px. So that will add 300 pixels to the 50 pixels that's already there. So plus equals will add 300 pixels to the 50 pixels that's already there, and it'll move it left 50 pixels. To 350 pixels from the left-hand side. Let's see if that works. Move box, and look at that. It moves it exactly where I wanted it to go. And that's really cool. So you could set how long you want that animation to take. You could make it go longer if you wanted to. After the animate, after the object here, I could add in a comma and say, I want this to run over 5 seconds, something like that. And that will animate over 5 seconds. So let's see what that does. 5 seconds is really slow, but it is animating it. And that's pretty cool. Okay, great. So we're able to adjust the amount of time and the amount that it moves and what it does with the actual animation, all with custom animation. For our next button on example 4, we want to actually make all of these animations happen at the same time. So they're all going to move forward at the same time. So we will change both the width, the font, and the left positioning, all three of these. We're going to change all of them at once. And we can do that by just passing in these different properties into our object all at once, separating them with commas. So let's go ahead and do that, because that's pretty interesting to be able to see that actually work. So down here, once again, I'm going to use my jQuery object to go get this pound, but what I want is do all. I want that button, do all. So I'm going to get pound do all. And then I'm going to add a click handler. Click for when you click the do all button. And then we're going to run a function when that button is clicked. And there we have it. So here now we want to affect box, parentheses, pound box, like so. And again, we're going to do the animate method. And we're going to pass in our object. So we do the curly braces. And first we want width, 710 pixels. So I'll put that in here. Width 710 pixels, and then a comma. And then we want font size, 36 pixels. Put that in there. And then a comma. And then we want left plus equals 300. So we'll put that in there. And you'll see now, I got some extra spaces at the end. That doesn't really matter. It's fine. But you'll see with all of those in there that now when I come over and test this thing, first I also want to put in an amount of time. That will be really helpful. So after the curly brace, put a comma, and then I'm going to put 1500. So that's going to go over a second, and it's going to take a second and a half to do all of these. So let's come back over here and refresh this. And when I click do all, it should do all of those things. Pretty cool. It runs all of them at once. Now, the last button is to do them in a sequence. What if we want to do, first we want to grow the box, then we want to grow the text, then we want to move the box. So we want to do each one of these in a sequence. And we can do that with callback functions. So each one of these animations can have its own callback function so that when it finishes, it calls the next one. And when that one finishes, it calls the next one. It can be confusing for the syntax in order to get this to work, but once you sort of understand it and know how to do it and mess with it a little bit, it's not too hard. So let's do this again. So I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to copy that and stick it down here. And instead of getting that button, I'm going to get this one, sequence. So when you click the button sequence, it's going to take box and it's going to animate the width to 710 px. And I'm going to put a comma. I'm not a comma. I'm going to put a comma. And then I'm going to put, say, 1500 for how long that animation should take place. And then I'm going to put another comma and I'm going to add a function. Okay, so it's really easy to get confused here because we're going to put everything into this function here. So I'm going to make sure I'm clicked between those curly braces, move that down, and then I'm going to go get this one. Font size 36. And I'm going to put a comma here, and I'm going to put 1500 seconds in there. So the 1500 milliseconds, so it's 1.5 seconds. 1500 milliseconds in there, and then a comma and another function. Parentheses, curly braces. It's really easy to lose track of this stuff, so you have to be really careful with it. But then I'm going to put the next one inside these curly braces. So I'll move that down, and I'm going to do this one here. I'll change that to 1500. There we go. And that's the last one, so it doesn't get a callback function. So I've got a callback function inside a callback function inside a function that happens when I click. And let's see that that works. If I come over here and test this, refresh, if I did it right, sequence, it should do that one. When that finishes, it does that, and then it moves it. And everything is working all in a sequence. And that's pretty cool. So with the JavaScript effects library, we can do all kinds of really interesting things. And you can animate all kinds of different CSS properties. However, it is better to do the animations in CSS with transitions or keyframe animations in CSS and then apply those classes. But sometimes using the effects library in JavaScript is still useful. And especially if you're doing something fairly quick, there's not a lot of reason not to use it. So we'll see an example of when is a good place to use this effects library coming up when we create our tabbed interface.